There are 15 days left until the June 2nd provincial election, and the race is on here in Haldimand, Norfolk. Welcome to this candidates debate presented by the Haldimand Press in partnership with Windecker Road Films and sponsored by the Realtors Association of Hamilton Burlington, the Caledonia Regional Chamber of Commerce, and the Caledonia Lions Club. My name is Connie Smith, your moderator for this evening. I want to thank all of you joining us online and, of course, our live audience. And I must say, it's kind of nice to see people's faces in person once again. Well, this certainly is a race to watch. We have 9 candidates running in this riding to replace outgoing incumbent Conservative Toby Barrett after representing this riding since 1995. Toby is here. Mr. Barrett, you can relax tonight. But on behalf of everyone here, I want to thank you for your service. Now, as for everyone else, we hope tonight's debate will help you make your decision and firm up your resolve to get out and vote. So, a few moments to talk about some housekeeping things and how the evening will unfold. Each candidate will be given a minute and a half to introduce themselves. Each candidate will have a minute and a half to respond to questions that have been pre-submitted by local residents. Candidates have not been given access to the questions beforehand. Time permitting, we will allow additional questions from our audience. We have a box to the right of the hall with Caitlin from Haldimand Press standing by to take any questions you wish to write out and submit. Candidates will have the option of a 30-second rebuttal per question, and candidates will then have 3 minutes each for closing remarks. So right now, let's meet the candidates seated alphabetically in order of last name, beginning with Bobby Ann Brady, Independent; Aziz Chowdhury, Liberal Party; Eric Coverdale, Green Party; Nate Hawkins, New Blue Party; Sarah Lowe, NDP. Thecla Ross, Freedom Party, has not arrived yet, but we're told she'll be here any moment. And Sheldon Simpson, the Ontario Party. Thank you, candidates, for putting your hats in the ring and being with us tonight. Unable to attend tonight, the PC parties Ken Hewitt and George McMorrow running as an independent. Now, candidates, we expect a lively but reasonable decorum to ensure a fair and equitable discussion. We ask you to respect each other by not speaking over one another and speaking to each other in a civilized manner. Again, each one of you can request 1 rebuttal of 30 seconds per question. I have my trusted cowbell ready here if things do get a little out of hand, but I'm sure it will not. Now, our first question will begin with the leftmost candidate, and each moving after the starting point will move 1 over to the right. And our timekeeper, Manny, to my right, will be timing you and giving you the signal when you have 30 seconds left, 10 seconds left, and when your time is up. So here we go. Let's start with our introductions. 90 seconds. Let's begin with Bobby Ann Brady, Independent.
Good evening, and thank you to the Haldimand Press for organizing this all-candidate night and for inviting us to participate in this important aspect of democracy. My name is Bobby Ann Brady. I've spent the past 23 years working for the people of Haldimand Norfolk in my role as executive assistant to MPP Toby Barrett. I was told by a member of the Premier's team just a few weeks ago that they could run a monkey in this riding and win as long as it had a PC logo on its back. People across Haldimand Norfolk were offended by this. As the local PC president for the past 20 years, I am offended as well. The proposal of a 40,000 person development at Nanticoke is also of concern. I've done main streeting along Highway 6 and businesses are worried with the already congested roadways. God forbid we have another road blockade. Urban sprawl has hit our riding. Here in Caledonia, we are hearing at the doors that people are beginning to see their small town rural way of life eroding, and they feel threatened by the idea that Caledonia is set to triple in size. With development comes the need for increased health services and education, just to name a few. Recently, Toby and I were successful in securing a $20.4 million capital investment for the construction of a new joint use elementary school. We petitioned the Ministry of Education to ease pressure on existing schools in the area and to support the surge of residential development. I know life is becoming unaffordable and you are worried. I am worried too, but I am here tonight to show you there is hope for our future. I look forward to your questions presented.
Thank you. Aziz Chowdhury, Liberal Party.
Good evening, ladies and gents. I'm your Liberal candidate for this wonderful riding of Haldimand Norfolk. I came to Canada in 2006 with my family, my wife and 4 children. Although I live in Mississauga, by profession, I'm electrical engineer. I have been working in this profession more than 25 years. So I have worked in many provinces in Canada as well as in US on multi-million-dollar projects. I have experience in design and project management, and I have successfully completed many projects in my life. I have been working with Liberal Party of Canada since last 10 years as a volunteer. I worked in many federal and provincial elections as a volunteer. Also, I worked with some local organizations, raising funds for hospitals, food drives. It's my passion to work, have a public service. In addition to my professional job, always I have a passion, I should do something for the public. During my projects, I was meeting pupils. We used to build transmission lines, and I have interaction with people always. So once my party asked, okay, do you want to go in this riding? I immediately accepted it. This is a beautiful riding. I'm grown up in rural area in small farming community. So once I came this riding, I felt like I came back to my own home.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chowdhury. Next, we have Eric Coverdale with the Green Party.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Can you hear me all right? It sounds like I'm not hearing myself, but I assume that you can. First of all, yes, I'd like to thank the Haldimand Press for holding this debate. Really looking forward to hopefully dazzling you with some interesting things that the Green Party has to offer in this election. So again, my name is Eric Coverdale. I moved to the riding of Haldimand Norfolk just in Langton area, July of last year. Bought a farm there with my soon-to-be wife. We're engaged, going to get married in August. I'm an engineer by training. I've got 14 years experience building solar energy projects. I've had a fruitful career doing this, but it's a really politically charged industry. It shouldn't be that way, but because politics is always interfering with renewable energy, I felt the need to get involved in politics. In 2011, that was my first foray into this avenue, and I stood up for green energy then, as I am again now. I was really impressed with Mike Schreiner. I lived in Guelph for a number of years, where I helped him campaign and win his seat as the first Green MPP in the Ontario legislature. And yeah, now I'm here asking for your vote because I think that politics really needs to be fixed here. And I think the Green Party has the solutions that, that the system most desperately needs.
Thank you. Next, we have Nate Hawkins, the New Blue Party.
First off, I want to say thank you guys all for coming out tonight and for giving me the opportunity to speak. My apologies. Oh, now. Okay, my name is Nate Hawkins. I am the New Blue candidate for the Haldimand Norfolk. I am a lifelong resident of Haldimand. I grew up actually in Caledonia here. I currently live now with my family of 5 in Fisherville on a small hobby farm. I have a Bachelor of Arts degree in criminal justice. And in the past, I've served in the military as a reservist. Now I'm a full-time firefighter with the City of Toronto, and I've been there for about 6 years. I also volunteer as an acting captain at our local fire hall in Fisherville. Why am I running? 2 things. First, for me, it's about my kids. Like I said, I have 4 kids. What kind of a province will they be inheriting from me? Mountains of debt, government overreach, a weakened democracy? I have to be able to look them in the eyes and say that I did everything I could to make this province better for them. Secondly, it's about bringing representation back to this riding. Career politicians and political operatives care more about their careers than the people they represent. And that has to change. It's time for everyday folks like you and I to step up and take back this riding. It's time to send a message to Doug Ford. He can't act like a Liberal for 4 years and then appoint a Liberal and expect to have the support of the people of Haldimand Norfolk. In my opinion, the most important job of an MPP is to listen, and I'm excited to be here today to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Sarah Lowe with the NDP.
Hello, everyone. All good? Okay, excellent. So tonight there will be a lot of promises made here. Promises about affordability, fixing long-term care, commitments to rural communities. But the reality is most of the people on this stage or on this table cannot deliver those promises. I'm sorry. I know many people feel disenfranchised with the current political system. You don't feel representative. This is why we have a slate of candidates from brand new political parties and independents. Some of what they're saying will resonate with you. In fact, some of it resonates with me. But the political system is designed in such a way that even if one of these candidates is elected here in Haldimand, Norfolk, they will never be able to get anything done. It sucks, I know, but it is the way it is. But for me, Sarah Lowe, your NDP candidate, I will be able to deliver on some of these promises, all of these promises, regardless of who the premier is, and I'm confident it will be Andrea. The NDP will be in the position to get things done for you. We do have bold promises, but we have no choice. This province is in big trouble, and we need to invest heavily in sectors that have been left to starve for so long. We will not house people by building thousands of unaffordable homes. We cannot tackle a climate crisis by providing wetlands or paving over wetlands and farmlands. As I said tonight, I do have a ton of ideas, but I know you will have tons of ideas, but that's all they're ever going to be. The NDP has a plan. I'm Sarah Lowe, and I'm your NDP candidate, a longtime resident of Caledonia.
Thank you. Thekla Ross from the Freedom Party has not arrived yet. When she does, we will have her introductions for you. Sheldon Simpson of the Ontario Party, over to you.
Can everybody hear me all right? Yeah, I guess so. All right. My name is Sheldon Simpson. I'm your Ontario Party MPP candidate for Haldimand Norfolk. I'm a professional firefighter. I'm an acting captain as well. A little bit of a familiarity up here, I guess, for that. I think over the last many years, I've personally been touched by an awful lot of things. I'm a resident of Dunnville right now. And when we moved into Dunnville, we found a community very quickly. We've lived rural now for over 20 years, and we've seen what can happen with the erosion when a rural riding like this can turn into a commuter type of village and town, which then ends up becoming a city. This is why the developments that we're talking about in Nanticoke are such a critical issue to address. Other things that have personally touched my life, as well as professionally, is we've seen an awful erosion in the healthcare system. Our nursing homes, our hospitals, hallway medicine is not something new. This is something we've been talking about for decades, and we've done nothing but pay lip service to this particular thing. I'm concerned about the education system. I have two young boys, a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old. I worry about their future. I worry about where we're going. And I think it's time that we look at where the problems have originated from. Legacy politicians and legacy parties have had their chance. It's time we return the power to us, the people. I'm Sheldon Simpson for your Ontario Party. Thank you.
Thank you. We will begin with our questions now. And again, these have all been submitted by residents of the area, and those with us here tonight will all be submitting questions as well if desired. So our first question, and we'll begin with Ms. Brady, and then each question will begin with the next candidate over to keep it fair. The pandemic has taken its toll on so many aspects of life and work, especially the health of our citizens. Do you support increased funding to our hospitals to help to pay for the replacement, for instance, of outdated essential equipment? If not, why not? And if so, how much funding would you support? Ms. Brady, we'll start with you.
The pandemic has definitely shone a light on our healthcare system and its inadequacies. I think first and foremost, before pumping more money into our healthcare system, we have to look at where the money is going. I often feel that the money is being soaked up by administration and it is not being put into the frontline staff. Nurses will tell you that. Nurses are burnt out. No amount of money is going to fix the burnout and the disrespect our nurses feel on the front lines. So money isn't always the answer. We've seen a lot of money pumped into our healthcare system over the past few years. Unprecedented amounts of money have been put into Ontario's healthcare system, and yet we don't see anything getting better. So in order to address the problem, we have to look at what's working and what's not. We also have to treat the people that are doing the care in our hospitals and in our healthcare system with a little more respect. If we can find one good thing that has come out of the pandemic, it's to look at the incredible work that nurses and healthcare professionals undertake on a daily basis to ensure our health and security. Our nurses, our PSWs, and our other healthcare workers have spent the past few years working under unprecedented pressure. I've spoken to so many of them, though, and they're caring and they're diligent individuals. They're our friends, our family, and our neighbors, but they feel underappreciated. I will continue advocating for our healthcare workers because they can't always be collateral damage in the political tug of war.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Chowdhury.
Yes, of course, we need more funding for hospitals. Our hospitals are underfunded, and there's a long wait time for surgeries. And if someone needs prostate surgery, probably he has to wait 2 years. And during the pandemic, these were our nurses, doctors, and medical professionals. These were our frontline heroes. They deserve much better treatment from us. Ford government introduced Bill 124 and froze the wage of the nurses. We call them hero, but at the same time, government has frozen the wages of these frontline workers. There was a time when even family members were not confident to going close to each other. That time, these doctors and nurses, they were in the hospital, they were dealing this pandemic, they were protecting us. Ontario Liberal want to spend $3 billion to reduce wait time in next 6 years. Our plan is to hire 100,000 more healthcare professionals in next 5 years so that we can reduce this long wait time. In addition to this, we will cover tuition fee for nurses and medical staff who is working in the rural communities. We will create 15 new community health centers and 3,000 new hospital beds.
That's your time, Mr. Chowdhury. Thank you. Mr. Coverdale.
Thank you. Yes, the pandemic really did shine a light on how broken the system really was. And, you know, I have to agree with the others up here that so far have spoken that say that, you know, it's kind of hypocritical that we call the frontline workers heroes and then we freeze their pay in the way that was done. So the Green Party would certainly want to reverse that mistake immediately, as well as add many more frontline healthcare workers immediately. I don't have the figure right in front of me for how many they wanted to hire, but it was like, it was a lot. I think you said 100,000.
Yes.
I don't think that's realistic, but we want to hire a lot. One thing that's interesting about the Green Party is that we want to really take a healthcare approach through a preventative lens as well. Sorry, moving the microphone closer here. I think someone's got their hand on a volume switch too. They can tune me in and out. Yeah, so healthcare through a preventative lens. So, you know, the Green Party wants to do things like treat mental health, you know, increase mental health to 10% of the healthcare budget to treat these kinds of issues. You know, work with people that are experiencing addiction problems and treat that as a healthcare issue instead of a criminal offense. You know, there's all kinds of these things that we can do that will alleviate the burden on the emergency healthcare system with other measures.
Thank you. Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you. I'm a firm believer that access to a wait list is not access to healthcare. We have 420,000 backlog surgical procedures in this province and 2.5 million diagnostic tests backlogged. That's unacceptable. All three parties, major party solutions is to continue to shovel and throw money at the issue. And we have to invest in healthcare, but we also have to be creative instead of continuing to throw money at the system because it's unsustainable, right, for our kids. So at the New Blue Party, we're advocating for more choice in services. If you go to another province like Saskatchewan, BC, Quebec, you can actually go and get a private MRI. So if we bring that in with the stroke of a pen in Ontario, private MRI clinics can spring up. They can reduce that backlog and save the province money. Another way that I want to see us be flexible with our healthcare dollars is by assigning seniors money, giving them the seniors money, their healthcare dollars before they go to long-term care. Because we know that seniors want to stay at home, right? So if we give seniors their healthcare dollars before they have to go to long-term care, they have the option to renovate their home or perhaps pay a family member to stay home with them. And this will allow seniors to stay at home and will save the province money because you don't have expensive nurses or long-term care professionals having to take care of them, right? So these are just a couple of ways that we can innovate and be creative, save money, but provide better healthcare for people, give people more freedom and more flexibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah?
Thank you. Long before COVID, hospitals have been in crisis in this province. Hallway medicine, surgery backlogs, folks that have, non-emergency surgeries waiting 18 months, 2 years, 3 years for these surgeries, people in debilitating pain, but it's not considered an emergency. This was going on long before COVID. And then in March 2020, when the world imploded, what we saw in healthcare in this province, probably across the country, was all of those problems that existed well before COVID, they were exacerbated. They were made 10 times worse. People were not able to visit family members in the hospital. Surgeries, cancer diagnoses, the backlogs in surgeries, it's going to take years to recover from this. This shows, because in the grand scheme of things, our limits to accessing hospitals was very, very brief. If the problems didn't exist before COVID, we would already be in a better shape. The reality is hospitals need to be heavily invested in. What we've learned from COVID is that mental health is a huge issue in this province and it's not dealt with. That's why the NDP would bring mental health under OHIP. That means mental health access, not just mental health paid for. It means bringing mental health workers into small communities like ours. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Simpson?
Thank you. So healthcare is a pretty broad question. There's an awful lot that's engaged with healthcare. We've got everything from nursing homes to our hospitals to our opticians, who were recently on strike because they couldn't come to an agreement with the province about funding. In fact, they hadn't had funding in almost 20 years as far as their increases go. So healthcare covers an awful lot of things. Obviously, we're going to have to do some increasing funding because, quite frankly, we've got an aging population. So we're going to need increased funding just for that. But we're also going to have to take a look at some of the administrative levels and a lot of the red tape that we have in our healthcare system right now. There's an awful lot of wasted money that goes to all different levels that aren't required and aren't actually getting to the patients directly. We have a very robust healthcare policy within the Ontario Party. One of the proposals that we have is very similar, actually. We were looking at introducing alternative medicine, options that we have that can reduce the burden on the healthcare system themselves by giving people more choices and more options to look for some of those other choices and options for themselves. We have burnout with our hospitals and our doctors and our nurses. We have hallway medicine. We routinely operate at 95 to 105% capacity. It's not something that's new. I've spent a lot of time talking with a lot of nurses on the ground, and we realize that they need more support. And the best people to talk to are the people in the healthcare system to actually find out what they need, because they're the experts and they're the ones who can help guide us. Thank you.
Thank you. Still with the pandemic, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about our students and the education system. A lot of students have been impacted by the pandemic through online learning and other things. If elected, I'd like to know what you would all do to support our students and reclaim a positive learning environment once again. This time, we'll begin with Mr. Chowdhury. And just a reminder to everyone here to make sure your phones are turned off. It could happen to anyone, but if we make sure our phones are off, we won't be disrupting anyone. So again, Mr. Chowdhury, we'll start with you about what you do to help our students who have been impacted by the pandemic.
Well, the Ford government, they cut the tuition grant for university student. And also they laid off thousands of elementary school teachers and they increased the class size. And this has impacted our student learning. In addition to this, they want to continue online learning and they saved a lot of money and which they have used on their own discretion to other contingencies or other things. What we want to do, if we are elected, Ontario Liberal will double the OSAP funding for the student. We will eliminate provincial loans interest. We will also give $2,000 apprenticeship to students who are working in rural area. We will invest $1 billion for new programs and college in the rural communities. In addition to this, we will scrap Highway 413 and spend that $10 million to build new schools in the communities. We were planning to hire 10,000 more teachers. We will reduce the class size to 20 students, and we will hire 10,000 more teachers to teach these students. In addition, we will hire 5,000 more educational workers. We will have focus.
That's our time, Mr. Chowdhury. Our timekeeper will give you the cues
Okay,
over
I did
here,
not see.
but
Thank you.
thank you. Mr. Coverdale.
Thank you. So the Green Party wants to enhance affordability and access to post-secondary education by converting loans to grants for low and middle income post-secondary students. So I think this is a good step in the right direction because affordability is another crisis on top of healthcare right now in the province. Yeah, I think as well as, helping with subsidies for students more, I think that universities also need to be regulated more. I think that this is an issue that not a lot of folks are talking about, but I think that they have basically been run as for-profit enterprises for too long, and the government continues to subsidize them and subsidize them more. And the cost of post-secondary education is now much higher than what the actual value of that education is. So I think someone needs to step in and try to regulate the educational institutions more, not only to make it more affordable, but also to provide a better educational experience for the people of Ontario. Yeah, and also we support in-person learning, and we want to oppose any move toward mandatory e-learning or hybrid models.
Mr. Hawkins.
So the pandemic was incredibly hard on our kids. The lockdowns that were imposed by the provincial government were incredibly hard on our kids. Isolating them from their friends and family, the on again, off again of schools being closed down. And 1 in 4 Canadians sought mental help during the pandemic, mental health services. And so we have a real big mental health crisis going on in our province. I would be advocating locally that we need to get more mental health services in our riding, right? So I'm all about local representation. We need to bring more mental health services to our riding so that kids can get the help that they need to be successful in schools. Then at the New Blue Party, we also want to give families the flexibility to choose whatever learning works best for their family, whether it's, sending their kids to schools with masks, sending their kids to schools without masks, whether they want to send their kid to a private school or a homeschool or learning pods. We want to give parents tax rebates if they choose an alternate form of education for their kids, and that will help them have the freedom to educate their kids the way that they want and the way that works best for their family.
Thank you. Ms. Lowe?
For years, successive governments have cut programs, special education funding, they've increased the class sizes, and schools have literally been crumbling. Then 2020 hit and all these kids went home, and there was no plan to deal with this. There was no real plan to deal with online learning. In the beginning, we all, us parents know what it was like, going home at March break in 2020 with no idea what was happening, thinking it was going to be a couple of weeks, and then a couple of weeks turned into a couple of years. In Ontario, our students have suffered the most of any other province in this country. We have kept our kids away from school the longest. We have disrupted these children's lives in far worse ways than any other province. And there's no reason for it. But the reason is we have a conservative government that doesn't care about public education. They have been looking for ways to insert a private formula into public education for as long as the Conservatives have been around. And this was the perfect opportunity for them. So what they did was they allowed public schools to disintegrate during COVID. So parents feel, and parents at this table feel that they have no choice but to remove their children from the public school system. The NDP sees that we need to re-engage with state students. We need to get programs back in. We need to invest heavily in teachers, mental health, and child and youth workers. Thank you.
And Mr. Simpson?
So again, I'm going to refer back to the Ontario Party's very robust policies about the education system. We actually have two policies specifically targeting K to 12, as well as post-secondary education system. And I'll touch a little bit on it now. One of the things that we're proposing is a credit system that would follow the student around. Some students learn in different ways, different methods. Education needs to be tailored to the different learning styles and learning skills of the students involved. Right now, we spend $12,500 per student, whether they attend a public school system or not. A lot of schools aren't providing what they need. This isn't, let me be perfectly clear. This isn't because our teachers aren't perfectly equipped, because we have some of the best teachers in the world, but a system that doesn't necessarily allow them in a curriculum that forces them into a certain way means that they might not be able to meet the needs of specific students. So if we introduce this system where we have $12,500 that follows them right now to the public system, we're proposing a credit system of $7,500 that would follow the student, whether they went to a private school, a public school, and one of our additional proposals, charter schools, which have consistently shown through research, particularly in New York City, to benefit some of the lowest socioeconomic and the most depressed people in our society. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Brady?
Well, the COVID-19 pandemic has wreaked havoc on many aspects of our lives. Ontario students are some of the most impacted by the virus, which has seen schools shuttered for extended periods of time. To get students back on track, Ontario must put in place its Learning Recovery Action Plan. It must also create world-class, modern, safe, and student-centered learning environments for the next year and beyond. Every student must be supported to unlock their full potential in a rapidly changing world, so they may develop the skills they need to succeed in any pathway they choose. One priority is to prepare Ontario students for success by improving their academic achievements while equipping them with the skills and knowledge they need for success in science, technology, engineering, and math. We must also focus on strengthening reading and math skills, as well as mental health promotion. To catch students up academically, Ontario should expand its summer learning opportunities, as well as expanded teacher-led online tutoring. Ontario has to make good on its promise to invest in the student mental health strategy. In order to respond now and in the future to learning disruptions caused by the pandemic, the Ministry of Education must assess both the impacts of the pandemic on Ontario students and the results of the ministry's efforts on an ongoing basis.
Thank you. Our next question is a little bit related to the pandemic, I guess, because everything seems to be related to the pandemic, but inflation. Highest levels in 30 years. Look at grocery prices, gas prices. Apparently, we wait till tomorrow, I think it's going to drop a few cents a liter. We've lost an entire generation's ability to buy into the housing market. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are to help out with the housing crisis in Haldimand Norfolk, and how you would balance density in town cores versus protecting farmland here in Haldimand Norfolk. This time we'll begin with Mr. Coverdale.
Thank you for giving me first crack at this very important question. Yes, housing affordability, very interesting, tragic, I would say, problem that we're all faced with now. The younger people are faced with especially. 175 acres, that's the number of acres of farmland that is lost every day in Ontario to sprawl. And the Green Party wants to stop that immediately by enforcing the city boundaries so that the cities cannot continue to sprawl and eat up the farmland at the rate that it has been. We also, recognize that there needs to be affordable housing. So the Green Party strategy differs from the other major parties in the sense that we believe that people should be able to work and live in the same community, right? So we don't believe in commuting. We think that nobody wants this, and it's also bad for the environment. So why are we even, planning this kind of architecture for our societies? So more jobs where the houses are, and this is the strategy with the Green Party of Ontario.
Thank you. Mr. Hawkins.
Inflation's a huge issue. We've been seeing it eat away at our paychecks and our savings over the last couple of years. And this can be laid directly at the feet of government with excessive lockdowns that have increased supply chain issues and both loads of money being printed off to support the economy. So I would, in terms of affordable housing, we need to preserve that farmland. We need to be building affordable housing for our young people. So the way you do that is by increasing the density that we do have, by building townhomes and low rises, and building that first-time home buyers, allowing first-time home buyers to get into the market. We would eliminate the red tape on building new developments and multi-generational properties. So that would allow you to build granny suites and garden suites at an easier rate. And then we would also allow, pardon me, we would hold the municipalities accountable for any delays in their developments. So we would make sure that their developers and people that want to build can have the ability to do so without having unreasonable delays by the municipality. Thank you.
Ms. Lowe.
Thank you. So affordability, we could talk about affordability for many, many minutes. So the NDP is obviously extremely committed to affordability, and we have some plans in place that would help sort of small scale, sort of everyday families sort of cope with surviving on their paychecks and also how they're supposed to live. So we would immediately have the Ontario Energy Board regulate gas prices. That would, it's not going to make your gas $1 a liter, but it will certainly help with the $2 and the $2.10. We would immediately implement, and I mean immediately, the $10 a day daycare strategy put forward by the federal government. And we would also lower insurance rates. Now, these are small things, I know, but they do help families sort of pay for their cell phone bill or have their kids in dance classes. But in terms of housing, the NDP has a solid housing plan that addresses not only home buyers, but also renters. So starting in 2022, an NDP government would make renting more affordable and give renters more security through the Residential Tenancies Act. We'd increase the housing supply, we'd end exclusionary housing, and we'd make it easier to buy a home with help with rents or help with loans. We would expand inclusionary zoning. So we would see that houses and new developments would have to include affordable housing, and we'd increase the supply of affordable housing by 250,000 units in 10 years.
Thank you. Mr. Simpson.
So when we talk about inflation and we talk about the housing crisis, we look at things like the proposal to say, well, we can get to $1 a liter in gas because they have that in Alberta. We're being taxed to death on so many of these things. And the reality is right now we are hurting, we're suffering, and we don't have the money that we did. The only way for an economy to recover from an inflationary crisis is if people start spending money in the economy again. And if that means that we have to roll back some of the taxes to get things rolling again, then that's something that we need to actually explore and address. We have a foreign dependency right now on agriculture and a lot of other energy supplies, for example, because we're just not exploring it. And it's because we're losing our farmland, and it's because we're not using sustainable growth in our rural communities like we have here in Haldimand Norfolk. We at the Ontario Party do have a policy that does address the housing issues. One of the main components is we want to put a stop right now for a period of time till we get things under control, to stop foreign ownership coming in and buying our farmlands and buying up our houses. This is driving the cost to unsustainable levels that people can no longer afford to buy into. And I myself worry about how my children are going to be able to afford to buy a house in the future. And the only way to get it under control is to slow it down, get the economy moving, get people spending money. And if that means we have to take a few hits for a little while, that gets us all back in the game.
Thank you. Ms. Brady.
So yes, inflation has now hit a 30-year high. Food prices, food inflation is up to a staggering 10% as well. I've heard from people who cannot put food on the table. People are struggling between food prices and gas prices, let alone being able to afford a home, especially new couples starting out. This is what happens when governments print money, like the federal government did to pay its $500 billion deficit. More money chasing fewer goods never ends well for you and me as the taxpayer. Government needs to stop spending under control, eliminate the inflationary taxes and deficits that are driving up the cost of living. Cost of government is driving up all of our costs. Inflationary taxes make it more expensive for businesses to produce goods. The central bank governor should have said no to bankrolling Justin Trudeau. Further, Doug Ford needs to stand up and lean on Justin Trudeau instead of following in his footsteps. He needs to call for tax cuts. He needs to call on Ottawa to help make life more affordable by allowing farmers to grow more food, generate more energy in this country, and get red tape out of the way. It's common sense. We need to get rid of the red tape when it comes to housing and look at creative ways to house people. For example, you can turn a home in the GTA into a mansion for one family, but you can't take that same home in Haldimand, Norfolk and turn it into a duplex or a triplex. We have to look at maybe selling off government buildings and housing people and turning those into apartments and cutting the red tape so that we can do that quickly and get people into creative housing.
Thank you. And Mr. Chowdhury.
So the inflation is a global phenomena. I am going sometime for my work in US and I saw the gas prices are also doubled there. So it's impacting all the countries all over the world. Housing is a big crisis. When you hear that your house price is almost double, it sounds good to me, but I am concerned how my children will buy the home. I have 4 children and younger one is in grade 11. So sometimes I think how they will afford. In bigger cities, somebody even earning $100,000, he cannot buy a home. This is a big crisis, and last 4 years, Ford government did not give any plan for new home constructions. So also there is no regulation, house selling system. There is overbidding going on. Real estate agent tell you, I have this offer, and if you are going over this offer, I will sell you house. And this type, there's no clear regulation that we can stop bidding. And this also increased the housing prices. Ontario Liberal will build 1.5 million housing in the next 10 years. This is our plan. We will also build community housing for low-income pupils. We will support, we will regulate the selling process. We will also plan to have stop foreign buyers who are coming here, buy the house and empty houses, stay there and nobody living there. This also increase the housing demand in the market. We will recommend to wherever we have to build a new house within existing boundaries. If possible, we have to do vertical construction, more apartment building, condominium buildings, providing more facilities to people.
Yes.
So
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Still with housing candidates, the proposed Empire Communities development in Nanticoke is, of course, a very big issue in this election, in this riding. The project would see approximately 15,000 homes, 40,000 residents, up to 11,000 jobs brought to the area surrounding Stelco and Imperial Oil Refinery. A poll conducted by the Haldimand Press currently shows 65% of the population against the plan, 19% in favor, with the remainder unsure. The question, do you support the proposed development? Why or why not? And Nate Hawkins will lead off this time.
This is a huge local issue and we need to have local input on this. So my problem with the development in Nanticoke is not what they want to build, but how they are going about getting approval for it. So we have a situation in Ontario, we're getting approved, whereas a lengthy, complicated process to get developmental approvals, unless you know the right people. Do you have the right connections with the PCs or Liberal parties? If you do, it's a piece of cake. You get to skip local democracy and get an MZO, which is a ministerial zoning order. No need to consult with the local people then. So we have a situation where well-connected insiders get special treatment, but regular folks like you and I get the difficult bureaucratic process. Sadly, this is the type of government we have come to expect from the Liberals and the PCs. A certain candidate who isn't here tonight has lots of developer friends. So maybe that candidate's friends will be able to get approvals, but I'm worried that the rest of us will have a harder time if he's elected. It doesn't have to be that way, though. We can build homes efficiently with fair rules for all, with local consultation, and drive down the cost of living for everybody. So we will increase the housing inventory through increasing that density in the dense areas that we have now, but we don't want to pave over that farmland. And we need to do it in consultation with the locals. Thank you.
So let me be very, very clear. The NDP is not opposed to development. In fact, part of our housing strategy is the building of 1.5 million new homes in Ontario. What we are opposed to is development that is done without consultation with people, without consultation with First Nations in the area, without consultation with environmental protection agencies. And as my colleague here points out, this particular development will invariably be done through an MZO. And this is because Empire development communities, they have been significant donors to the PC party, almost guaranteeing an MZO. It means for the folks, the person not here, it's a great deal, right? Lots of donors, lots of money to the PC party. But what about the people of Nanticoke? What about the people of Haldimand Norfolk? They're going to build on a piece of land with nothing around it. No schools, no hospitals, no social services, no pools. So who gets to foot the bill for all of those amenities once we have an explosion of big homes that nobody can afford? Thank you.
Mr. Simpson?
Supporting development is not a bad thing. If we look at supporting sustainable growth, particularly in rural communities like this, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's going to bring more money to the economy. It's going to bring more support. However, this proposal at Nanticoke, for over 20 years, we've lived rural, and we watched where we've lived turn into slowly a commuter town before we moved to this area. We found the community in a very, very short order, and we discovered that something was really special here about Haldimand Norfolk, that we still had sort of old town values and old town community feel. It was easy to fit in. It was easy to meet people. If we turn into a commuter town, then we're going to lose that. It's going to fade away. It's going to disappear. And one of the major components of looking at a development this size, let's put this in perspective, 42,000 homes. There's 48,000 mailing addresses across Haldimand Norfolk already. 42,000 homes is almost doubling what we have already. Our infrastructure is already stretched. Our wastewater plant is already struggling to keep up. We have trouble with water distribution. We don't have hospitals to support everybody. We don't even have palliative care for children anywhere between Niagara and Hamilton. We don't have the infrastructure to support something like this. Sustainable growth is all right, and it's acceptable with the consultation of the people who live here. And when it's overwhelmingly shown that people are against something, then we have to open our eyes. This can't be about the benefits of a select few who are going to make a lot of money on this or benefit otherwise. This has to be about all of us, the residents here, and how it's going to benefit us.
Thank you. Ms. Brady?
Development is what this election is all about locally in more ways than one. I can't find anyone at the doors who thinks bringing 40,000 people to the city of Nanticoke is a good idea, except Haldimand County. I have spoken out on this proposal, and so has Toby Barrett. I watched the committee and council meeting several weeks ago when Stelco showed up questioning the purchase of 4,200 acres of land at the Nanticoke Industrial Park by Empire Homes. Stelco described at the meeting how shocked they were that they were not consulted on the proposed development. They believed Haldimand County was putting the cart before the horse. No call, no consultation, to which there was no apology, no explanation. In fact, the mayor, the PC candidate absent tonight, told Stelco that day that Haldimand County did not need the permission of Stelco or Esso. Stelco went on to say that if the proposal moves ahead, they will pull out, and so will Esso. Once again, the mayor, the PC candidate, made it clear to the delegation that they need not come to council and threaten. This is the county's biggest employer and tax base. Let's be honest, something isn't right here. An industrial park is the last place 40,000 people should live. As anyone living around the oil refinery in Sarnia will tell you, it's dirty. And folks from the city will gobble up these cheaper homes, commute to work, pick up groceries in the city with no benefit to Haldimand County. In fact, it will be a drain on the county when the city needs a hospital and needs a school. The developer will long be gone and you and I will fit the bill. Don't be fooled by the promise of the 11,000 jobs. Those jobs will come in from outside of the area with the builders that come in from the GTA in the greater Hamilton area.
Thank you. Mr. Chowdhury?
Yes, I visited this place 2 days ago. I want to see how is the area and what is existing there. I saw Stelco, Imperial Oil, and OPG facilities there. You know, this is an industrial area. And if everybody of you will be doing some work for your household needs, we will build a house. So from where we will bring the jobs? This is the first question. Any industrialists need land, electricity, and water, and a road network. 3 things are available. 4th one is not yet not in good condition, but this is the best place. If we want our children to go away from this place, go to big cities, we have to build house. I hope nobody want their children to go so much away. What they will do if they have higher education, what they will do, not everybody can do farming. They have to go away. This is the ideal place. We have to develop this for industry. We should build house only. There is Townsend land available. We will build in that, build that land first. If needed, we should build high-rise buildings close to the lake, better on the lakefront, better view. People would like it. And this, another thing, building houses near this industrial area is not a good idea for the health condition of our seniors. There is.
All right, thank you. Mr. Coverdale.
Okay, so 15,000 homes, 40,000 residents, 11,000 jobs. It all sounds really good. I think it just needs to be done right. So, I think it's interesting that that you mentioned 65% of the people in the county are for it, yet Bobby Ann says she can't find anyone who's for it. So there's some kind of disconnect here that someone needs to find out what it is. Probably there's a lot of NIMBYism, not in my backyardism going on. And then there's probably people that just are concerned about the proper process being followed. And they don't want the MZO to carte blanche the thing through. So yeah, I just want to make sure that it's done right. I think they should all be net zero green homes. I think, there should all be EV chargers there. I think the jobs need to be wherever the homes are being built. I think there should be a long-term sustainable job for every home that they build. Some kind of oversight like that needs to take place to make sure that this is a sustainable development and that it's truly benefiting the residents of Haldimand Norfolk.
All right, thank you. The next question, we're going to move along to Indigenous issues in Haldimand Norfolk with hearts and minds of Canadians focused on the residential school tragedy across the country and all the challenges being faced by so many Indigenous members of communities. I want to get your thoughts on this, and in particular, how you will handle Indigenous land claims and hold both the federal and provincial governments accountable to Indigenous issues. And this time we'll start with Sarah Lowe.
Say this issue is near and dear to my heart. Now, I have lived in Caledonia for 14 years. When we moved here, it was after Douglas Creek. So there was a lot of ill will in this town. Unfortunately, and there's been ill will continued for many years. And it breaks my heart, to be honest. I've heard that prior to what happened at Douglas Creek, the relationships between Caledonia, Hagersville, and Six Nations were incredible. That we shopped in each other's stores, we had friends, and all of that exploded after Douglas Creek. And then again, I guess things sort of settled a bit, and then the Mackenzie development over again in Caledonia, it brought back a bunch of old feelings, old hard feelings. We need to move forward. It is clear that the land that we are debating on tonight, the land, there is question about who it belongs to. And the reality is we need to get to the bottom of it. We need a land claim. We need it to be put to bed finally, and it needs to be put to bed for the citizens of Caledonia and Hagersville, and it absolutely needs to be put to bed for the citizens of Six Nations, because we cannot move forward until this is settled. And we have to respect that historically, for thousands and thousands of years, this land was not ours.
Mr. Simpson?
Time is appropriate for this question when we look at, it was about a year ago that we discovered the residential schools and the mass graves. So the timing is rather relevant at this point. The Indigenous people have had a really tough time. We've had lip service paid to them for a number of years. It shouldn't be that hard to find a way forward. We've dumped money into it. We've had all kinds of issues that have gone through forward with this, but we seem to still keep running into these problems. Part of the problem is we have things like the UN recommendations, and we haven't even really looked at them, and we haven't even sat down and had these discussions. Truth and reconciliation only happens when both sides come together and we decide that we're going to move forward. We learn from our past. We can't change it. We have to come together with an open mind and open ears and listen to each other. We have to understand the concerns on both sides, and we have to find a way forward. They haven't had a good deal, and it's shown. This is something that we have to find a way to forward together by listening, working for it, and making it happen.
Thank you, Ms. Brady.
In law for a reason. Living in a free and democratic society, we in Ontario have one rule for all, and nobody is above the law. The credibility of government is lost and policy is doomed to failure when the law and democratic processes are allowed to be sabotaged. Over the past 16 years, I've assisted as Toby has tried just about everything we can think of to bring resolution to the Caledonia area. A framework for police preparedness for Indigenous critical incidents is the government's so-called solution to Indigenous grievances and protests. This antiquated document needs to be changed. The Haldimand Police Services Board has spoken about this, and they believe citizens would be better served by the OPP if the policing model was changed to democratic policing. Once elected, I will be lobbying Ontario Solicitor General to change the model. In fact, that lobbying has already begun. Caledonia has been beaten up for 16 years. 12 days in Ottawa was enough for the mayor there. Locally, people call it here the Caledonia cover-up. Why did it just take a few days for the mayor of Ottawa to declare a state of emergency when truck horns were honking? And yet the mayor of Haldimand County has failed to do the same in 16 years as he's watched hydro towers dragged across roadways, a vehicle thrown off a bridge, stolen bus, stolen excavator, roads ruined by the creation of trenches. The list goes on, and yet no call by Haldimand County. If Haldimand County roads are blocked in the future based on the action and comments of both the provincial and federal governments about the traffic in Ottawa, I expect the same response here in Caledonia. A precedent has been set, and for governments to do anything less would simply be unacceptable.
Thank you. Mr. Chowdhury?
Yes. I believe that everybody should be treated equally, as Bobby was saying. I agree with that statement. The landowner issue is a long-time issue. It is, I believe, in the court, but it has to be solved for everybody's satisfaction. I understand that Caledonia businessmen have suffered a lot due to blockades, and they have incurred losses. We have to focus more support on Indigenous, we have to focus and make good Indigenous relations and support teaching libraries. Should have holiday on Truth and Reconciliation Day. In addition, we should provide more facilities, clean drinking water, child care system. We should build new homes, and we should preserve the land which First Nation they claim. We have to I would say that we have to respect their right. We have to respect what they say. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Coverdale.
So the Green Party platform here on page 20, we have a number of good bullet points here. Working in partnership with Indigenous communities is the first headline, where we want to implement UNDRIP to ensure equity for Indigenous peoples, which is establishing true nation-to-nation relationships with Indigenous peoples. It's in the platform to support Indigenous land defenders in asserting their treaty rights and actions taken to confront threats to their traditional lands. Address the legacy of colonialism in residential schools. So there's a number of points in here, working with the federal government on truth and reconciliation efforts that are being made already there. Fixing the healthcare gap, I think, is something that's more provincially oriented. So working with the federal government and Indigenous communities to identify and close the gap in health outcomes between Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities. So that's something that can be taken action on and measured very specifically. We also want to increase the number of Indigenous professionals working in healthcare through training and mentorship opportunities, and ensure the retention in Indigenous communities, particularly in northern and remote communities, which is going to be very important so that the folks up there can get the healthcare that they need. Finally, there's another good point here, to fund an Indigenous-led housing strategy. So we want to fund 22,000 Indigenous-owned and operated permanent homes under an urban and rural Indigenous housing strategy. The strategy and implementation would be led by Indigenous communities to create homes for Indigenous peoples living in Ontario.
Thank you. Mr. Hawkins.
This issue hits close to home for me as well, because I grew up in Caledonia when I was in Caledonia when the first Douglas Creek Estates incident happened. Government created this issue by failing to listen to Aboriginal land claims and resolving them in a timely fashion, and made it worse by failing to uphold the law when things went south. So it's been a constant passing of the buck between different levels of government, who shrug their shoulders and point the finger at one another, saying it's your issue, it's your job. We need actions and solutions, not finger pointing. So if I was elected MPP, I would be pushing for a provincial Aboriginal land dispute tribunal to be formed, to be made up of historians and judges. If a land dispute like Douglas Creek Estates does occur, there would be a pause on development. The tribunal would investigate the claim within a limited time frame and render a decision if the claim is legitimate or not. If the claim is illegitimate, any other protest action would no longer be tolerated, and the full force of the law, which we saw in Ottawa, would be in effect. If the claim is legitimate, the provincial government would buy the land from the developer and give it to the closest band council. This will ensure that developers and builders have the certainty they need to build, and the rule of law is upheld for everyone, while making sure that any legitimate Aboriginal land claims and lands are returned lawfully back to the people. Establishment parties don't care about small communities like Caledonia, but as your representative, I can guarantee you that I will be fighting for you every day at Queen's Park.
All right, thank you. Our next question involves the freedom rallies that we've seen across Canada and actually went around the world as a result. A question from one of our attendees here tonight, who is concerned about our government enacting the Emergency Measures Act. If Premier Doug Ford gets back in, is he going to bring in digital ID mandates and lockdowns? And what will you do to stop these things? I should add, if in fact they should be stopped. We'll start with you, Mr. Simpson.
Freedom rallies had some very positive effects in letting us realize that we weren't alone in our isolation, and the division of politics that's been played against us has been played masterfully. And that was a really good opportunity for us to sort of see that, listen, we weren't alone, and that there were a lot of people that were really upset with the way things had happened. When we move into the policies here, and this is interesting, I got an email from the federal Conservative Party the other day saying that Justin Trudeau didn't meet the criteria in order to enact the Emergency Measures Act. And this is now going through the court systems, and we're now seeing this coming through legally. We didn't meet the criteria. Yet on the other hand, Doug Ford and his government are pushing through Bill C-100, enacting emergency measures with no sunset clause. Indefinitely, we are under a state of emergency here in Ontario right now. And there's no reason for it. So on one hand, they're saying we didn't meet the criteria. And on the other hand, they're saying, well, let's make sure this criteria has no end in sight. Let's just keep it here. So the digital identification, and furthermore to the whole idea of digital currencies and all these other things, these are ways and methods that can be used in order to monitor us that we don't want to be monitored. It's not something that's going to be just convenient. Once the framework is there, they will be able to take this framework and use it for whatever purposes they want. Maybe not this government, maybe not the next one, but somewhere down the line, the temptation is too strong. We already saw the government illegally tap 30 million Canadian phones to track us for our own good. That's not an acceptable reason to break the law. I'm getting the time card. We'll move on.
Thank you. Ms. Brady.
I'll keep it a bit shorter. I do not believe in digital ID. I do not believe in seizing people's bank accounts. I do believe and support the right to be heard and to protest peacefully. Back in February, our office issued a statement before the convoy reached Ontario. It was heartening to see the overpasses crowded with support, with no one dropping vehicles, as we've seen here in Caledonia. Organizers kept the convoy peaceful and police kept it safe. Later in February, a separate group blockaded internal trade at the Windsor-Detroit Ambassador Bridge, delaying billions of dollars in trade and affecting the livelihood of automakers, farmers, steelworkers, and others. Our office actually received calls from businesses who were affected. To prevent future occurrences, as Sheldon said, Bill 100, Keeping Ontario Open for Business, passed with all party support save one. Toby Barrett did vote in favor of the bill after publicly expressing criticism of some aspects of the bill. Unfortunately, when a bill is passed, it's in its entirety, not in chunks. Because the law does not draw a distinction by race, we feel it may actually help prevent future blockades of internationally traded goods going through the Caledonia area. The act applies to any other transportation infrastructure that is of significance to international trade, which we see happen and go right through this community itself.
Mr. Chowdhury.
Yes. Canadian Constitution provides right of peaceful protest. So this freedom rally was, it was for the weeks, and we have the right to protest, but not at the cost of interfering and terrifying other people. This downtown was occupied by the truckers. There was continuous honking and diesel fumes. People were afraid going out of their homes. So I don't support this type of protest. We have the right to protest, but it's not my freedom finish when other person knows start. I have freedom up to that point, but not after that when I touch that one. So this was, although it was federal government issue, and if my friends don't agree, they should propose what was the best option, how we have to control this one. And I believe it was required to clear the downtown. And there was no other option, I don't think, which we would have taken. This was because police were afraid to control, not afraid of those people, I would say. Some people were even, they have arms and they have the foreign support. We read in CBC, I'm not sure it's correct or not. but they have foreign funding as well. So I think it was needed action that time.
Thank you. Mr. Coverdale.
Okay, so Freedom Rally. I was wondering if anyone was going to ask a question about that. Such a hot topic. Yeah, I think everyone knows why it happened, right? There's a government out there that, they seem to be unaccountable on so many levels. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot more authority and control being exercised by the government. The digital ID that you mentioned maybe is the next step, and rightfully people are afraid of that. People, of course, do have the right to peaceful protest. From what I saw, that's what it was. That's the start, and then it progressed into, blocking commerce, which, I don't know if that makes it non-peaceful or not. It certainly wasn't violent in the sense of what you can see in some other places when they protest. Yeah, were all options explored before they called the Emergency Act? I don't think they talked to the truckers at all. That was an option. So I would have liked to have seen that happen. I think it's very careful, I need to be very careful to say whether I would support, what happened there, what didn't, because there's so many things that may have happened there. Who really knows what happened? Because all I see is doctored images through the media, right? And it's difficult to know exactly what transpired. So, yeah, basically, I just think that, I'm against digital IDs to be very simple. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Hawkins.
Yeah, the New Blue Party is against digital ID and government overreach in all of its forms. I supported the freedom movement. There was a lot of frustration at the restrictions that were on, and still are, on people, preventing people from making a living, traveling to see loved ones, and that boiled over into the Freedom Convoy. So in a democracy, elected leaders are supposed to listen to the people, even if you don't necessarily agree with them. Instead, Justin Trudeau passed the Emergencies Act, and his buddy Doug Ford also passed an Emergencies Act in Ontario to stamp out the protests, which only makes people more bitter and more divided because they're not being heard. So I've been knocking on doors the last couple of weeks, and I've been hearing people's heartbreaking stories about how friends and neighbors have been alienated from each other, how they've lost their jobs. And that's a direct result of politicians like Justin Trudeau and Doug Ford and Ken Hewitt framing the public discourse into an us versus them mentality. I want to bring back a united Ontario where we can focus on our shared values: hard work, mutual respect in caring communities, and individual freedom to live our lives free from undue government interference.
Thank you. And Ms. Lowe.
All right, let's be very clear. The emergency measures imposed by the Ford government had absolutely nothing to do with tracking us or locking us down or the pandemic, really. This was implemented in order to pass through the legislation that they've been trying to pass through for years. They were able to do it without much debate. This is why the emergency measures have gone on and on and on. It has nothing to do with the pandemic. It's about Ford's plans, Ford's buddies, all the things that he wants to see accomplished in this province, privatization of everything. That's why we have the emergency measures that's continuing. The only way that Doug Ford is going to introduce digital ID is if Deco Labels gets the contract, I assure you. Or maybe one of his big business buddies. And finally, the NDP will never, ever entertain this in any way, shape, or form. What we will do, though, is we will follow the Ontario Science Table, and we will follow an independent public health. That's who we follow.
Thank you. We have another question to do with healthcare. With Haldimand Norfolk having such a large geographic area and a very top-heavy population, age-wise, I think there's more of us 65 and up than under or something like that these days. What are each of your plans for primary health care and palliative care in Haldimand Norfolk? And along with that, what are your plans to recruit for the large percentage of doctors that are about to retire? So looking at the elderly population, plans for primary care, palliative care, and making up for a projected doctor shortage. Here in Haldimand Norfolk, we'll start with Ms. Brady.
Making up for the doctor shortages, we need to do a better job of recruiting, going to recruit doctors and offering them incentives to stay in our small communities. They don't often like to stay in our small communities because they don't feel supported. They don't feel supported in the healthcare system. They feel alone. And if they're new and they're young, they want to be in the bigger hospitals, the bigger facilities where they can feel more supported by a team around them. With respect to our growing population, we know seniors prefer to stay at home as long as they can. And we must take steps to promote that kind of healthy living that ensures that that can happen. It is better for the healthcare system on a whole if seniors can stay in their homes longer, and it's better for their mental well-being too. I've taken calls from family members frustrated by missed appointments with home care. It's critical home and community care be part of our integrated healthcare system, not stand alone. Home care is not just for the elderly, but also for other vulnerable members of our community of all ages who also need assistance. Fixing home care is something each leader promises, and yet it never seems to get better. In order to reform all facets of the healthcare system, we need to get home care in order. Maintaining hospitals for those who need care is vital. Using hospitals as an alternative level of care for our aging population is not efficient and not fair to our seniors. However, this is what happens. Long-term care beds are being built in our area, and I've been part of that process to push for these beds. I'm done. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chowdhury?
Yes. Our plan, currently this Norfolk Hospital has 106 beds capacity. So our plan is to increase the bed size in the hospital. Ontario Liberal has a plan to introduce 3,000 new hospital beds in the province. So if I am elected, I will have a right share for this hospital. I hope so. We also have a plan to hire 100,000 doctors and medical professionals. So Ontario Liberal also offer to cover tuition fee and for nurses and medical practitioners who work in rural communities. And we will create 15 new community health center. So if I am elected, I would like to have one more community center. In addition, we will have 15,000 more home support care. We will have more mental health services support. For government, get rid of private nursing home audits and inspection. Because of that, more than 30 people died in the nursing care homes. So we will make sure that all nursing home work under the Ministry of Health in government supervision, and our seniors get better treatment what they deserve.
Thank you. Mr. Coverdale?
Okay, so very relevant for Norfolk Haldimand. Green Party has in their platform, fulfill remote and rural healthcare needs, rebalancing the healthcare funding formula to ensure better access in rural remote areas. We want to make permanent the 50 community wellness nursing positions supporting First Nations communities. We want to invest in increasing the number of Indigenous-led health clinics. We want to expand the roles and scope of nurse practitioners as primary healthcare providers, especially in areas that lack primary healthcare options. We also want to use incentives to bring physicians and allied health professionals to northern and rural communities. So, as well as creating opportunities for specialist and subspecialist trainees to undertake electives in core rotations in the north. So the last two were about the north, but the rest were Haldimand Norfolk oriented. Something I think is very important for healthcare is preventative medicine. So if we can just reduce the volume of cases in our hospitals, it would really go a long way to alleviating our current crisis and promoting ongoing sustainability of the system as well. So doing things like supporting and promoting healthy behaviors to prevent disease and reduce risk factors such as poor nutrition and smoking. These early investments will lead to better long-term healthcare outcomes and reduce stress on the system. We want to expand access to family health teams in communities across the province, and we want to increase opportunities for physicians to join team-based models of care, including a diverse array of healthcare providers in the teams to ensure a holistic, connected, and comprehensive approach to health.
Thank you. And Mr. Hawkins?
Fun fact of the day, the only place you can have a baby in Haldimand Norfolk is at your house with a midwife. There are no hospitals in this vast riding that we have where you can actually have a baby. You have to go out of the riding. That's crazy to me, and it's troublesome because I have 4 kids, and the more you have, the quicker they seem to come out. That's just my experience. I will be advocating for local health services. So just because we are rural does not mean that we should not have access to basic health services like mental health and like having a baby. And like I spoke about before, I would like to see seniors being assigned their healthcare dollars before they have to go to long-term care homes because they want to be at their homes. They deserve to stay at their home as long as possible. It'll save us money because they will be able to retrofit their home, stay at home longer. They will be able to pay for a family member potentially to take care of them, and we won't have to pay a professional nurse or long-term healthcare professional to take care of them instead. So it's a win-win. We'll save money and we'll give seniors the flexibility and freedom that they want. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lowe?
Foremost, the NDP is committed to bringing community healthcare centers to rural ridings such as ours. I mean, having a baby in your living room, I guess, lots of babies in your living room maybe, is not ideal, obviously, for anyone. We have very few hospitals. We have very few doctors here. I mean, we're not in the far reaches of Northern Ontario where you understand sometimes or somewhat why it's harder to attract doctors. There's no reason why we can't attract doctors to this area. We're 30 minutes from Hamilton. We're, an hour and 10 minutes from Toronto. There's no reason why we can't get doctors here, but it means we have to be recruiting them more aggressively. But what I do know and what I've heard time and time again is that home care in this riding is severely lacking. I was knocking on some doors in Port Rowan on the weekend, and I chatted with a woman who had been released from hospital with staples in her leg or in her hip, and her son, an engineer, had to take them out because there was no home care available to her. Her doctor, 2 hours away, she couldn't sit in a car for more than 10 minutes. So her son had to come and take the stitches out. Home care, keeping people in their homes as long as possible, that is the ideal. What we saw during COVID is we don't want our parents in long-term care. We want them in their own homes, getting the care that they need for the rest of their lives.
Thank you. And Mr. Simpson?
So there's an awful lot to this. So we'll try and get through it as quickly as we can. We can refer to our policies again on some of these things, but one of the things that we're addressing obviously is a shortage of doctors. In the education system right now, we have a system that has a cap system on it where we have, let's say, for example, 100 positions, and we might have 150 qualified people. Why are we capping at 100 positions when we have 150 people who can qualify for doctors? That addresses a shortage, not just here in Haldimand Norfolk, but across the province altogether. Another thing that we can do here is look at a care facility on a per capita basis, but also taking into account the fact that it can take you 2 hours to drive from one end of the county to the other, leaving an awful lot of people in rural areas that just don't have access to these facilities. Rapid response units that are equipped with advanced care paramedics can get to the scene considerably faster, can provide advanced care faster, and can make the decision as to where they need to go and get them there that much more quickly. This is something that is considerably more cost effective than building more buildings, although that's not a bad idea, but it's something that we can use as a tool to bridge the gap in the meantime. We also need to recognize incoming professionals. Right now, we have doctors on the streets driving taxis because they can't get it accredited when they've come to our country. There's no reason that we can't, especially in a shortage, use our ability to address these issues with the professionals that are here right now that aren't allowed to practice because of thick layers of bureaucratic red tape.
All right, thank you. We're going to move now into some issues that relate to the way our election processes work in Ontario. First question has to do with a poll. When Ontarians were polled in November about moving to proportional representation in Ontario, 78% stated they support it. Are you in favor of proportional representation? If not, what electoral system do you support? And this time we'll start with Mr. Chowdhury.
Well, our party support the proportional representation, and it is already included in our platform. That's what I would say.
All right,
Thank you.
fair enough. Mr. Coverdale.
Yeah, the Green Party is all about proportional representation. I think probably the Green Party would stand to gain the most from proportional representation. In Guelph, I was actually attending several meetings that were head by a committee there that was really looking into what kind of proportional representation would work best for Ontario, because there's different kinds. There's some ranked ballots and there's other different things you can do to make it more consistent with what the electoral body really wants, is really what it comes down to. And first past the post is just awful. It really needs to be changed.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yeah, we can see when you go door to door and you talk to folks, there's a lot of people that are jaded, frankly, with the system. They feel like their voice cannot be heard anymore. And then they feel forced to vote for the mainstream establishment parties. I would support proportional representation because it would give an opportunity for other parties to get in there, a diversity of views, and it would allow people to have more, feel like they have more freedom to vote in line with their true values. So I would support that. It would also eliminate the stranglehold that we see that the main parties have on the electoral system, right? We've seen Doug Ford working with the Liberals and the NDPs to pass a vote subsidy program. He got rid of it when he first got into power in 2018. And then he decided, actually, I do need that vote money, so I'm going to bring it back. And he brought it back last year and he raised it by 40%. So these establishment parties, they basically want to hold on to power at all costs. If they have to rig the system and get taxpayer dollars to do it, then they will. So the more parties we have in there, the more diversity, amount of diversity of voices we have, the better.
Ms. Lowe?
In 2018, Doug Ford got 40% of the vote. And yet for the last 4 years, Doug Ford has had 100% of the power. That is a flawed political system, a system that the NDP certainly has never benefited from, and we won't. The Greens don't benefit from it. You know, it's only the Liberals and the Conservatives that benefit from first past the post. It is the way it is. It doesn't have to be that way. I believe people don't know a lot about electoral reform because we have had a referendum in this province and people voted against electoral reform. I don't think people know enough about it. The NDP is committed to electoral reform. And I know that we're considered an establishment party, but I know that for the benefit of all Ontarians, we need a new electoral system. I think part of the reason we saw the Freedom Convoy is because people do not feel represented. If Trudeau had kept his promise in 2015, that would be the last election with first past the post, I don't think we'd be sitting here today with a whole bunch of different parties, with a whole bunch of different views, because people would feel heard and they would feel represented. So yes, the NDP unequivocally supports electoral reform.
Thank you. Mr. Simpson?
A vote is a vote is a vote. One person, one vote. This fractional representation that we're seeing in particularly areas like Haldimand Norfolk, where we have policy being dictated to places like this, from downtown Toronto, where half the people don't even know what a septic system is. It just doesn't make any sense the way it's being done. So absolutely, we need electoral reform. We need electoral reform on so many different levels. There are different models and we would have to explore them and sort of say, you know, this one's going to work the best and it's going to make the most sense. But for every single person that casts a vote, they have to realize that that vote counts for one, not a fraction of one because of where they live or because of the location that they're in. That just doesn't make any sense. I think when we look at electoral reform, there's other things to look at as well. The Ontario Party is proposing MPP recall legislation because part of electoral reform is actually accountability. And these are things that we have to look at as a society and say, listen, are we really getting our voices heard? Are we really actually getting to say what we want to say? We don't have to be trapped by picking one party or the other and have this iron fist top-down rule. We really have to start growing things from the ground back up, and electoral reform is a great place to start.
Thank you. And Ms. Brady.
I support the first past the post electoral system. I'm an athlete, I'm a kickboxer, I'm a hockey player, and I go into the ring for a kickboxing match, and one person comes out the winner, the other person comes out the loser. It's the way it works. You play a hockey game, you score more goals, you win the game. That's the system I support. I do believe, however, that we have to get our political parties in order. Democracy is in jeopardy, and we've seen that locally with the PC candidate chosen the way he was in this riding. We need to clean up our political parties. We need to treat people with respect, and that's the kind of reform that I will be fighting for.
You've led me into our last question of the night, and it is about government trust. A lot of discussion about what has happened in this riding with respect to a lack of a nomination meeting and proper processes. And this isn't the first time or the first riding for something like this to happen. A Haldimand Press poll asked residents what they felt about a number of Ontario government policies and actions, and each one was responded with an adamant not enough, no, no, no. So it says there's a lot of distrust to many of us when it comes to the way our governments work. And my last question to you all is, what do you think should be done to clean up or change the way our election processes are working right now in Ontario, in this election, in future elections, perhaps even countrywide? We'll start with you, Mr. Coverdell.
Well, the first thing you can do is vote green. The status quo parties that have been in are, you can't expect them to change anything. They're the ones that got us here. So something needs to change, and that starts with electing a new governing party. Accountability in government, yeah, I think is at an all-time low. I think, they're just operating under the premise that they need to keep all their cards to themselves, and that they need to kind of manipulate the public for their own better good. And that's not what I believe in. I believe that true democracy, everything needs to be transparent. I believe that, anyone can come to an MPP and talk about their concerns, and that MPP needs to be very honest with what he's been doing day to day with all his constituents. And that's not just, behind closed doors, that's all out in the open. So I think, yeah, practically the only way to do it is to vote in a new party.
With our audience here, Mr. Hawkins.
Yes, so Belinda Carahalios, which is our MPP that's elected to the legislature right now, when she first got into the legislature in 2018, she actually attempted to pass a bill that would clean up internal elections in internal party elections in the PC party, Liberal parties, et cetera, making it illegal to rig votes in elections in those parties. And it didn't really get a lot of support from the PCs for some reason. I'm not sure why, but they weren't too enthused about it. So that bill actually died in committee. And so we need to get back to being more transparent with what happens on the party level, right? We saw it here with the nomination of what's his name, and Ken Hewitt, and he won't like people want to be involved at the grassroots level. They want to have a say. Right. So we need to get back to that. We need to get back to being transparent in the nomination process locally and have people so that they can be in on the ground level and feel like that they have a voice at every level. Thank you.
conservative and liberal governments, they do not govern with the people in mind. They govern for the next election. So the second they're elected, it's about what happens next. So it's about raising money at the riding associations. It's about getting big donors. It's about the Empire communities. It's about the Losani homes. It's all about generating money for themselves to get them reelected. And it's because they want to hold on to power. It doesn't work because here we are today. Everyone is upset, right? The Haldimand Press, their poll says that. I think if you were to poll every single community in this province, you'd get similar results. The current system does not work. The Ford government, almost immediately when they came into power in 2018, passed legislation threatening to use the Notwithstanding Act to take away municipal powers. The municipal governments need to have the power to govern on their own. It should not be up to the provincial governments to take or give power as they see fit. These are huge issues. They're not going to be solved today. They're not going to be solved, unfortunately, with this election, unfortunately, because the current electoral system doesn't work. And we go back to, we absolutely need electoral reform because it's the only way that people will be truly represented.
Thank you. Mr. Simpson.
So I agree, electoral reform is certainly a way to address this issue. But what we have is decades of erosion that have basically eaten away at the very core and fabric of what we have here. Politicians used to, and some people may remember this, used to actually be an honorable profession. Right now, we're kind of somewhere down there on the bottom of the list with, well, I don't want to give examples, I guess, but it's
Yeah, be
it's
careful.
not great on the list. It's ironic going from being a firefighter and an officer to being a politician up here. I mean, it's quite the slide all of a sudden in the eyes of a lot of people. But I think that that's not what this is supposed to be. The House of Commons is supposed to be represented by common people. And that's one of the things that we can do. Number one, we can stand up and say, listen, we have a voice together. We have to have common people in there who have common interests, common goals, people who have actually worked day to day. They know the value of a 100-hour work week, mud on their boots, people who actually understand what's going on. Legacy politicians and politics, they've turned it into what we have. This is decades of erosion, decades of trust that has been burned and bridges behind us that we just can't fix. The only way to do it is to change the way we do things, make a change, stand up for something, and do it differently.
And Ms. Brady.
I mentioned in my opening remarks, people have grown cynical. They're tired of being taken for granted, and I am too. This is why I'm here as an independent candidate. I had looked forward to running in a nomination race for the PC candidacy. That democratic right was taken away from me, and it was taken away from all of you. When Haldimand Norfolk elects me as an independent, you will send a message to Doug Ford and every single political parties that we will no longer be used for our money and for our vote. No party will be able to tell me to stand down when I make it to Queen's Park. Whatever Bobby Ann Brady wants to talk about on behalf of Haldimand Norfolk will make it to the floor of the legislature. What is important to you will make it to the floor of the legislature. I look forward to giving to Haldimand Norfolk, giving hope to the people of this province, of this country, by being courageous and electing an independent to go to Queen's Park and talk about local issues. I've seen it all too many times where politicians are told to stand down due to political party lines. It's wrong. And it's meaning that the issues like Caledonia, the blockades, healthcare and home care in Caledonia, in Haldimand Norfolk, are being ignored on the floor of the legislature. Let's be courageous. Elect me as an independent. We can be courageous, and courage can be very contagious. It will catch on right across this province, right across this country, and political parties will have no choice but to get their house in order.
And Mr. Chowdhury for a final comment on this.
Yeah, Bobby have given good statement because she is running independent. She's not afraid of any party. So my opinion is that we should respect people's choice. So in riding association, if people nominate a candidate, that should be candidate. That's my personal opinion, not the party opinion. This is something I would say, because if your MP or MPP is not working, we should not be voting again and again for him and re-electing him if he's not doing good work. We should make them accountable if they're not working. I saw many MPs, MPPs, they are good in election, but after election, they disappear. They say someone goes to Ottawa, someone goes to Queen Park, they're busy, meeting, something like that. Of course, they have work, but there should be a balance. The people who send you in the parliament, they need your attention. That you have to go and see and address them what they need, what are their needs. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. That just about does it. We're just asking the audience before closing, yes, we'd appreciate if you didn't speak out while our candidates are speaking. All right, I appreciate that. It's time for our final wrap-up comments. You have 3 minutes, each one of you, and we'll begin with Mr. Hawkins this time.
Hello. The people of Haldimand Norfolk have a choice this June. Will they continue to vote for the establishment parties, parties that leave our kids legacies of debt, parties that only work for lobbyists and party insiders? Or will they choose a new party, a party founded on values that most Ontarians agree on? Values like freedom to work and enjoy the fruit of your labor, freedom from government overreach, equal access to opportunities, and equal treatment under the law. We don't have to settle for parties where lobbyists, unions, and big corporations get special treatment and favors, and regular folk like us get bureaucracy. The PC party has become the provincial wing of the Justin Trudeau Liberals, teaming up to help each other spend more money. They are no longer the party of the people. They aren't even here asking for your vote. So it's time to bring in a new, fresh conservative party that will hold true to conservative values. The new Blue Party is poised and ready to replace the PC party as the true conservative party in Ontario. We have candidates running in every single one of the 124 ridings in Ontario this election. Let's bring back local representation to Ontario. Let's bring back principled and accountable government with the new Blue Party. I've been knocking on doors and talking to folks in these past weeks. The desire for change is here in Haldimand Norfolk. Join us to be a part of that change, to bring the power back to the people and to get this province back on track for us and for our kids. The best is yet to come. Thank you for listening tonight.
And Sarah Lowe, your final concluding remarks.
Thank you. So for the last 6 years, I have been employed as a constituency assistant in MPP Andrea Horvath's home riding of Hamilton Centre. This is a downtown Hamilton riding that has a lot of issues. I take calls and emails from the second I walk in the door to the second I leave, Monday to Friday, with people that are absolutely desperate. People that do not have enough money to pay their rent. They don't have enough money to put food on their table. They're on OW, their caseworker has cut them off. They're on ODSP. They have a small child who needs something for school that they can't afford. These are the calls that I get day after day after day. In my last day in the office, before I left to take on this journey, I had a woman at my door bawling. This is a middle-aged woman, a PSW, someone who has worked throughout the entire pandemic. She had been evicted from her apartment. She had nowhere to go. What I spent the last half of my day doing was calling every single shelter in Hamilton to try and find a place for this woman to live. This is why I'm sitting here today, because the NDP knows that this is a huge issue, knows that all the issues that we care so deeply about affect Ontarians. You know, Andrea checks in, I mean, she's a very busy woman, but she checks in with her staff and she says, Sarah, tell me what's happening in the riding. Tell me what you're hearing. Tell me what I need to know. And I tell her, housing, affordability, ODSP rates, and she listens. We're now doubling ODSP rates. We have a housing plan that is going to make a real impact on people's lives. We're going to introduce a housing benefit for people. So it's not just about living in city housing. It's about a portable housing benefit that people that cannot afford to rent anywhere in this province anymore will have access to funds to help them pay rent. This is why I'm running. And maybe I'm part of the establishment. I don't think the NDP is certainly part of the establishment in Haldimand Norfolk, but I'm running because the NDP can come through with their promises. Thank you.
Mr. Simpson?
Tonight, we've heard a lot of different solutions to a lot of different problems, things that have compounded over the years, things that have affected every one of us in our day-to-day lives as we try and live our lives as families, friends, associates, and coworkers. A good idea is a good idea. There's been good ideas from everybody up here. Everybody has the opportunity to have something, and everybody has a voice, and everybody has something to share. So I don't think we should ever discount each other's ideas just because it's from somewhere else. Doesn't mean that we can't use it, and we can't use an open door policy to make things work. But I can't help but wonder as we sit up here, how did we get here? How did we get to an election like this? Decades and decades of eroded trust from legacy politicians and legacy parties. They've had their time. We've walked through this door many, many times. We've seen this so many times. When are we going to start changing? We need to do something different. We have to pick on election day something, an opportunity. We can do something totally different. We can pick somebody who's going to fight for your values. We can stop trying to vote somebody out, and we can try and vote somebody in. We have 105 candidates running across the province. We have Derek Sloan, who has stood for his values and been punished accordingly, according to the Conservative Party. We have Rick Nichols, who has stood his values and been punished the same way. Vote for a party that's going to fight things like C-100, the only party to actually vote against the bill C-100, the Emergency Measures Act in Ontario today. We have to vote to return the power where it belongs. It belongs with us, the people, and it's time we take it back.
Thank you. Ms. Brady?
Thank you all for attending this evening, and thank you to the Haldimand Press for organizing. It's been a great night of discussion and presentation of views and issues. In my 23 years working in provincial politics, I have spoken to many of you who have lost hope. You are worried about your future, the future of your children and your grandchildren. You've grown cynical of leaders and governance, rightfully so. So have I. You must ask yourself, why didn't you have a say with regard to the PC candidate chosen here in Haldimand Norfolk? Why was democracy sidelined? Let's talk a bit about the city of 40,000 at Nanticoke, a city that will see the jobs of steel and refinery workers lost forever. Will it create employment? No. These GTA-based folks will bring in their own help. What happens when you have a community of 40,000? Well, as I said earlier, you need a hospital, you need a school. By that time, the developer will long be gone, and you and I will foot the bill. A city of 40,000 at an industrial park is a harebrained idea, and yet the mayor and now the PC candidate are trying to accelerate the process. We must do politics differently. Around the world, voters are turning away from the traditional political parties as they feel elites and special interests have infiltrated and hijacked the process. Will I split the vote in Haldimand Norfolk? The answer is no. I have been overwhelmed by the support and encouragement from all three main political parties. These folks are setting political affiliations aside. They're community-minded people. They understand Haldimand Norfolk has honesty and integrity, and that should always win the day for our betterment. Once Haldimand Norfolk chooses me to represent you at Queen's Park, I will not be told to stand down on any issue due to party politics. What is vital to Haldimand Norfolk will make it to the floor of the Ontario legislature. Not only will I fight against the city of 40,000, but also reducing the cost of living, creating housing that is affordable, standing up for our farmers, improving healthcare, expanding long-term care, creating good paying jobs, and creating those incentives to work, fixing mental health and addictions, cutting taxes and red tape, and also ending the financial punishment for those on ODSP, as well as boosting our local economies. In Haldimand Norfolk, we are proud of our small town rural way of life, but it is being jeopardized. Any previous leader, Mike Harris, Ernie Eves, John Tory, Tim Hudak, Patrick Brown would all say Bobby Ann Brady should be in the Ontario legislature. The truth be told, I am not an elitist, nor have I had ties to special interest. Haldimand Norfolk now has a choice. Choose those elites or special interest in backroom deals or choose me, Bobby Ann Brady, the true conservative on the ballot. I care about Caledonia and its people. I am the only candidate with 23 years of respected work and relationships at Queen's Park, in the riding, and across Ontario. Courage will be contagious.
Thank you. Mr. Chowdhury?
Thank you. I'm the only candidate with more than 25-year experience in many multi-million-dollar projects. That's what I can say, because I did not get chance to work with any MPP. So I can tell what I have. Ontario Liberal, if I am elected as your MPP, what I will do, I will work on increasing hospital beds. I will work on creating new program in Fenshaw College, so more agriculture student can read here, increase the housing for the students. We will do, I know this is agriculture community. There are a lot of issues. We have a meeting yesterday, debate. Our farmers have issue, migrant worker, they have issue, high fertilizer cost. There's a rural internet issue, high-speed internet not available. This is the nowadays a basic need, and there's natural gas issue. We want to improve the road. We will build new senior homes. Ontario Liberal will spend $1 billion on healthcare to clear the backlog of surgeries. We will spend $3 billion on schools. We will hire more than 10,000 teachers. We'll cap the class size to 20. So our student can read properly, proper education. In addition to this, we'll work on environment, clean environment. We will, Doug Ford cut the rebate for electric car. We will provide that rebate. We will we will introduce clean environment friendly transportation system. We introduce $1 ride program, which will eliminate a lot of cars in the province. So we will introduce transportation between the local rural communities, so people can avoid cars and travel, use for traveling. We have, in addition to this, we will work to develop industrial area here so that our future, our children can get job here. They don't go away from you. We need houses, but we need a balance here. So we want this area to develop. For development, you need jobs because you have a house and you don't have a job, how you will run the house? This is what our plan. We need a balance. We need housing, but as well as at the same time, we need jobs for our future generation. We need better education, better healthcare facilities for seniors. Our seniors need our respect. We owe gratitude to them. They're the one who paved the way for us. We are living in this society today. We have to respect them. They need better healthcare facilities, so where they can peacefully live there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And last but not least, Mr. Coverdale.
Well, thank you for the privilege of going last year. I'll try not to mess this one up for everyone and leave on a high note. Well, yeah, it's listening to what everyone else is saying, you know, it's kind of, I think it's easy to get really bogged down in the weeds and kind of get focused on these little issues here and there. But if you really think about it, I think if everyone can feel it, you know, society is turning a corner. And if you think about when you're driving, if you focus on what's right ahead of you, if you're going around a corner, what happens, right? You get dodging all over the road and you can't make the turn well. You got to look well ahead when you're turning a corner to be successful in that maneuver, right? So I think, you know, not to focus on too many small issues here right now. I just think that everyone needs to realize that society is turning a corner and it's not going very well. And we need a leader who's going to look well ahead to where we want to go. Look where the puck is going, as Wayne Gretzky would say. And I think I'm that leader. I think I'm someone who really knows the big problems and I'm willing to tackle the big problems, which is sustainability, climate change. Economically, we've got some major issues this isn't just about, housing affordability. This is like the whole economic system is coming apart. So it needs some real courage to tackle these problems. Think about like a game of Monopoly, right? Like when they invented Monopoly, that was to demonstrate how futile capitalism is. And now we're like in the final rounds of Monopoly where it's like all the houses are bought up and there's some people stuck going around collecting their $200 and wondering why they aren't making it. So just think about that, the big problems. Try not to get bogged down in the weeds too much there with the closing statement here. But yeah, society is turning a corner and some of us know it. More and more of us all the time. So yeah, I hope you'll consider really shaking things up. I hope you'll consider voting for the Green Party of Ontario. I think we've got some bold leadership with Mike Schreiner. I hope you all were able to watch the leader debate and let me tell you, as someone who has worked with Mike for years, I lived in Guelph and I helped him get elected as the first Green MPP in 2018. The most integrity of any man I've ever met, and very solid values. Like he's very selfless, and he's just out there because he believes in it. He campaigned and he lost. He could have gone off to any other political party and they would have embraced him with open arms, but he kept running for the Green Party because that's what he believed in. He believes that this platform is the best platform. It's what this province needs right now. And I hope that voters will consider it.
Thank you. I must say in concluding remarks from myself, how unfortunate it is that one candidate could not make it tonight. Thecla Ross couldn't either, so. Anyway, I was very impressed that you all spoke with such enthusiasm and hope for our political system. And I think that's something we really have to hang on to. So on behalf of the Haldimand Press and Windecker Road Films, I think we owe a round of applause, everyone, to these candidates for stepping up to do the job. Our future, our children's future is literally in your hands. So thank you for doing what you've done tonight. Thank you for your intelligent discussions and ideas and the optimism that I've seen here tonight. So thank you again. Thank you to everyone at home who has been watching us online. And thank you, audience. This was such a thrill to be around living real people again. This is such an incredible turnout. So thank you for taking time out of your day and nights. It's kind of rainy out there too, but thank you for being here. You are the reason why we're here. And every one of you, each one of your votes matters so much. So please don't forget to vote, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again. Have a great night and good luck to you all. And congratulations on an upcoming marriage, Mr. Coverdale, right? And to our firefighters and you all from different walks of life, thank you for stepping up once again. Good night, everyone.